1039 LI News Radio presents Your Island, the very best in talk radio, with your host, Tom Schiliro.
And once again, welcome back to our Wednesday edition. In the studio, I have with me one of Long Island's leading citizens, and that's to say the least. Frank Romeo has done something that raising awareness is something so important. And many of the folks know that on this program, we talk about our veterans all the time and how important it is. And Frank just did a 750-mile walk. That was across New York State, right, Frank?
Across New York State, yes. We started in Buffalo.
You know, and when I look at something like this, and I know you're not going to like this word, Frank, but, you know, and I'm going to say this because it's my show. You folks, to me, are the true heroes of what we need to raise the awareness. And I know you'll say, you know, you'll be contrite and so on. But this goes beyond the norm, Frank. It does. It goes beyond the norm to let people know about the issue of PTSD and how important that is that we raise that awareness. Now, you did this walk across America, I think it was called, or whatever the video is. And we're going to play the audio from that video so the folks can hear it. But Frank, just to start, because I'm going to have you on right up until the 1 o'clock hour. And I want to cover as much as we can because you're a unique individual and you've done some wonderful, wonderful things with this. I have callers that call onto this radio show that have their children, some of the men and the women, the moms and dads calling in because we have really pushed our military quite a bit in Iraq and Afghanistan and since 9/11 that we have to talk about this and how important it is. What got you started, Frank?
I suffer from PTSD. I'm probably one of the longest living veterans diagnosed at 100%. It's almost 50 years for me. And for the last 30 years, I've been teaching it, advocating for it, advocating for more education surrounding PTSD, studying PTSD, and bring it to the awareness level. We have to kind of refocus our attention on mental health in this country. I believe the stigma surrounding mental health is certainly not helping our veterans.
Yeah, I mean, that's well said. Now, people can find this video, correct?
Correct. You can go on my website. You could follow me. Students across New York State have followed me as a curriculum, as a learning experience on walkwithfrank.org. That's my website. You can, my contact information is there. Basically, we are a not-for-profit. Walk with Frank is a not-for-profit with a mission statement of education directed towards PTSD through a variety of mediums, including lectures, video, and outreach programs like walking.
And I want to listen. I want the folks to listen to your words and what they mean. And we'll also take phone calls right up to the 1 o'clock hour with Frank. If you have a family member been affected by this, have a question about this, that Frank is the gentleman to ask these questions to. I look at it this way, and then you talk about the preparation for war. Let's take the first 18 years of children, of their lives. You know, for the most part, you're children right up to the time you're 18, and even beyond that nowadays. And you grow up in a Long Island community. You're raised in Judeo-Christian heritage. Many people follow religion, you know, whether it's Christian or whether it's Judaism or so on. War and killing or part of that dynamic is not part of it. Then all of a sudden, that person with the frame of reference of literally peace, a peacetime culture, and a culture filled with loving parents, loving girlfriends and boyfriends and so on. How do you prepare somebody once they enter that military when this nation finds itself into conflicts so that we could avoid? You gave that horror statistic of 22 suicides a day. Is it that diametrically opposed wonderful first 18 years that we spend and then all of a sudden thrust into the battles of this great country?
That's exactly the problem, is we're not having a conversation about it. We're the students I speak to, for instance, now are 18 years old.
Right.
We've been at war longer than 18 years.
That's right.
And so we went to war before they were conceived.
Yeah. They don't remember 9/11.
No. Now we're asking them to go into the military, to experience horrific things, and then come home and be normal. We just can't throw them in without the preparation. I've been advocating for reality-based education. We have to have a conversation. I'm offering a new conversation at the educational level where we talk about PTSD. I've studied PTSD for 50 years. I've lived it. And so I travel around the country talking, giving them a heads up. Of course, we don't know how people are going to react in combat. There's no way of telling. That's the human spirit. That we're individual in that. But I think we've tried everything else. And I'll argue is what we're doing working. And I'll state that argument. If what we're doing is working, we wouldn't have 22 suicides a day. And that's not counting the living dead, the walking dead, the veteran that's drugging and drinking himself slowly to death. So that statistic is basically low.
Right. Well, when you consider, yes, drugs and the alcohol and because it almost becomes we need to numb the mind, based on that diametrically opposed culture, the war culture versus the culture of this great country. And we all, I mean, those of us who call ourselves Americans, we love the United States of America. And yes, we are forced to defend it from time to time. We have to defend it from time to time.
If you think about it, the last time we fought on our homeland was the Civil War.
Yeah, that's right.
For the most part.
Yes.
Since then, it's been an away game, and our team has been on the road.
Yes.
And since then, we've sent our children off to war, and we've fought in every corner of the globe.
Yes.
We need to have this conversation. We need to talk reality-based education. And I've developed these education programs, and they've been working, and I've proven that they've worked over the last 30 years.
And I want to talk about that when we get back from our commercial break, because I'm thinking of a few of my listeners here on this broadcast who have called in and told about some of the problems that their kids are having. Young men, 18, 19 years old, young women, 18, 19 years old, went to our high schools here in Suffolk County and went out to join the military because they felt the cause, they felt the calling, they felt the belief in that. And Frank, what's wonderful is that you and I are having this conversation the day before the 243rd birthday of the United States of America, the day before what I consider a wonderful, wonderful holiday, and that's July 4th. So let's hope we're going to make some perspective on this and see where we can go with this. I'm your host, Tom Schiliro. I am with Frank Romeo, who just a tremendous leading citizen here in Suffolk County and an advocate. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. I'm with Frank Romeo. We are talking about PTSD. Frank has an incredible background in really being an advocate for this issue and how important this is. I mean, I would put this right up on the top when it comes to issues in this country relative to our veterans and the military and so on. Frank, you talked a little bit about this whole idea of education and what we need to do, and particularly to prepare our young people for those who enter the military. Then I want to go back to these homeless shelters and the things that you did. I mean, the 750-mile walk, absolutely incredible. Let's go back to the education part of it. What are we saying? How do we educate to this?
Well, for 30 years, I've been advocating. I've been performing it. I've proven that it works, advocating for more reality in our education system. I've developed a concept with a Bayshore School District here on Long Island, and it was piloted a year ago, called the Experience of the American Soldier.
Okay.
So now this curriculum, it's not an extra curriculum, it's woven into mainstream curriculum. It's woven into 11th and 12th grade history, social studies, and government classes.
All right. Okay.
My concept is to spend a little less time on the battle and a little more time on the soldier that's in the battle. So we're giving it the personal touch. We'll find out, we'll learn about the battle, but we're also going to learn about the soldiers' homecomings, soldiers, who is the American soldier throughout history. And the curriculum starts at the Civil War and goes right up to today's war. It will give the students a sense of who we are as veterans, what a soldier is, what a veteran is, gives them a sense of country and sacrifice, and lays the foundation for future veterans. So future veterans now are getting a concept of American history veterans throughout history. For example, one presentation I did, the school studied Civil War letters, and then they studied my Vietnam letters. Basically, they said the same thing. I'm scared. I want to go home. So the concept of learning about who we are through American history. Governments change, policies change, but the propensity for American to fight and to go out there and put themselves in harm's way remains the same. So why is that? So the continuum of the American soldier. It's a fascinating look, and it's not extra work. So the teachers and administrators can't complain that it's extra work. It's just a refocus of the attention giving it the personal touch of the soldier.
Yeah, our number here is 631-451-1039, talking about PTSD and it's certainly its impact that it's having across the country to our veterans. I can remember as a police officer that it was in the middle of January and we got called to a scene where an individual was laying on a park bench in the middle of a particularly cold winter night, and he froze to death. When I got there, and he was just a veteran that had a place to go, and he walked into this park here in Suffolk County, lied down, and passed away.
And that's a problem in the stigma surrounding mental health. People who actually have a job or want a certain job and need to talk to someone won't come forward. They'll wait till they retire. I've spoken to many people in that situation that need the help, but the stigma surrounding mental health is not helping anyone, especially our veterans.
Yeah, and again, I'm so much of a believer in what you're saying, and this whole idea of bringing the dialogue out there. And your frame of reference, you were 18 years old and you were in a war zone.
Correct.
In Vietnam.
Right out of high school.
And I mean, I could, tell you, Frank, I can't even imagine that. I mean, 18-year-old today, we look at them as kids. I mean, if you think about it.
It's amazing. When I sit in a lecture hall and I'm talking to 18-year-olds and I look, to me, I'm 70. To me, they're babies. Yeah. They're just, they're infants. And war is a young man's game. Let's face it. I mean, they're impressionable. So they need to have, I believe they need to have all the material. They need to have all the information to make informed decisions of whether or not the military is right for them. I always wondered in combat, I looked at the guy next to me and said, he shouldn't be here. Why isn't he a chaplain? Why isn't he behind a desk? Why is he in combat? So not everyone is fit for this. So we have to kind of talk about this ahead of time. I believe we can put a dent. I'm not saying I'm going to solve all our problems and PTSD, but I believe we can get a handle on some of it and maybe put a dent in it in the future if we begin this conversation now. That's
you spent a year in Vietnam.
Correct. Not quite a year. I got shot up and left early.
Oh, so you were actually injured.
Yes.
Yeah. Just I guess that's something that you take with you.
Well, don't forget now the average age of a Vietnam veteran, a Vietnam soldier, was 19. So there were 17-year-olds there. I had a we call them Oklahoma because we all had designated places.
Right.
It was easier than remembering names.
Right.
And Oklahoma was 17.
Yeah.
So how do you justify that?
Well, again, as a young man, and then coming back into a situation, 631-451-1039 is our number here. Taking some calls. It's just, I don't even know how to phrase it properly, but to take a young person and to put them in that environment is just incredible. And you're saying that your suffering has been in excess or 50 years.
Yes, it's been 50 years. So I've been dealing with PTSD longer than any clinician practicing today. And 30 years of it, for the last 30 years, knowing the importance of it. And I don't want any young person to ever live through what I lived through and those feelings and emotions and that horror that I lived through for 2 decades. And I've been trying to advocate for it and reaching out and teaching it. I believe we need to talk about it out loud.
Right. And I'm glad we're starting the dialogue here on our midday program, 631-451-1039. We're going to take a phone call. We've got James over there in Calverton. Hey, James, you're on the air. You with us, James?
Oh, yeah, I didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
I've read in the New York Times magazine a month ago that PTSD is being cured on veterans with the use of medical marijuana. Football players are also being cured of their head injuries. I also you were talking about preparing people for war. Well, you better prepare these people that for when they come back, that America doesn't really care about you. We con you into these wars. We get you to fight for our corporations, and we're in Afghanistan and Iraq for 18 years and wasting money where we could be spending it here in America. So you got to tell these people before they even go that when you get back, you'll probably be sleeping on a park bench because our congressmen are more important about getting raises and doing what they want to do. And one more thing I wanted to say, that I think the recruiting, I've heard on a lot of like NPR and stuff, that these recruiting stations that try to get people to go into the service, the United States has some law saying that a recruiter could not have been a veteran. So here's a person in a recruiting office trying to convince an 18-year-old how glorious it is to have an M16, and he's painting this beautiful picture and telling these war stories, and he was never a veteran. It's a big con job, and I think it's got to stop. And I've heard this on NPR and other stations.
I know, but it's not, James, that's not the reality. The recruiters are in military uniform. Many of them have served. I've stopped in the recruiting stations. But as far as, I would say this, though, to you, Frank, I believe that the veteran today is appreciated by the American public. And that we do appreciate the work they have done. It was the Vietnam War era veteran that didn't get that sort of.
My trauma. I was more traumatized when I got home than I was in combat.
Wow.
I'll be honest with you. And coming home and literally I was spit on. I spent a year in the hospital in St. Albans Military Hospital. Anti-war demonstrators, they spit on me. They called me a baby killer, murderer. That was the political climate of the time.
It was.
And again, if in the big picture, you go into the darkness, but you come out in the light, because we wouldn't have PTSD. We wouldn't, the Vietnam veteran went underground for decades. I didn't talk to anyone that wasn't a Vietnam veteran. First, I didn't talk to nobody for 15 years, but then when I did come out of my trauma, I only would associate with another veteran.
Your trauma was to a point where you literally put yourself in an emotional shell? Is that?
Yeah,
Wow.
no doubt. I ate alone in the bathroom in the dark, and it just went on for years. So out of that, though, out of the festering of Vietnam veterans, and out of subduing our feelings and emotions in a political climate, out rose a need, PTSD. It went on for decades. The red flag went up for decades, and it wasn't until an orderly in Chicago connected the dots and put together a presentation. That red flag kept going up. I have nightmares. I don't associate. I don't do this. The normal diagnosis and for PTSD, and that began the snowballing. That began another research. That began an investigative project by our government that lasted 10 years. We really didn't have PTSD till the early 90s.
Well, so there was no recognition of exactly what you were going through.
Nope, not until the early 90s.
Wow.
That's when the American Psychiatric Association stepped in and redefined then Vietnam War syndrome, or then depressive neurosis, or shell shock. They isolated it.
Incredible. I mean,
and called it PTSD, and gave it parameters for diagnosis and treatment. Not until the early 90s. It's relatively recent. I've been teaching PTSD before it was PTSD.
631-451-1039. What a journey that you've been on. And speaking about journeys, the idea of walking across New York State and stopping and staying at homeless shelters and the food lines and so on, and meeting the homeless veterans and so on. What are they saying to you, Frank?
They're reaching out. They know most of the shelters I was in. Now there's transitional houses, meaning a veteran has X amount of time to get himself together. He has to be working towards a goal. He has to be either looking for a job. He has to be, of course, drug and alcohol free. That's another issue. So where do those guys go that do have those issues? So that's another problem. Or they're permanent residents. They do have veteran outreach centers where they live there permanently. So we have two basic concepts of homeless veteran shelters, for lack of a better term. They know they're working towards it. I have hundreds of hours of footage inside homeless shelters, inside therapy, group therapy sessions, inside outreach programs, and I have hundreds of hours of footage I need to put together in an educational documentary, and that's my next project. And I do need help, and I don't mind asking for help. This is an original project. This is the one-of-a-kind project. I've done something that no one else has done. I've lived it. I've lived it.
And the mere fact of visiting these areas, I know we have spent a lot of time on this program trying to re-get the homeless shelter open on the grounds of the Northport VA hospitals, so those folks can be near the help that they need. And I've said this, and interested in your qualification of it, that if you return from the military and you find yourself homeless or no place to go, that means the support system of family and friends is not existing.
Non-existent. So there's a disconnect there somehow. We shouldn't have the term in this country, homeless veteran. I mean, why do we have that term?
Agreed.
So right there, what apparently something's not working. There's a disconnect here. And what we're doing, again, every day America produces more veterans with a host of new issues. And so what are we doing? Are we running in place? We create this, and now we have to deal with it. And the bill has come due. We're at a mental health crisis in this country. The bill has come due. 22 suicides plus a day.
Yeah.
Homeless, PTSD rampant. And these guys are not coming forward because of the stigma. They want to get that job, and they're not going to get that job because I have a mental illness. I publicly state I have a mental illness. I suffer PTSD. I open each of one of my lectures with, my name is Frank Romeo, and I suffer with a mental condition. I have PTSD. And so we have to say these words out loud to begin the healing process. We can't keep whispering them and shoving them under the rug. It's no longer acceptable.
Our number here is 631-451-1039, speaking with Frank Romeo, who made a walk with Frank across the great state of New York. And
let me just clarify, the walk was to get attention.
To get attention, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
but that's fine.
Nobody wants to walk through Niagara Falls in February.
But you did that. but you got the attention, and the fact that you're here today and people know who you are and you've done that. You know, I started the program by saying it's not just somebody who wrote an op-ed article about how we need to pay attention to this. You took a form of activism to do that, and who better than a person that has been afflicted for almost 5 decades.
It was almost like, who else could do it? 50 years PTSD. Right. You know, it was almost like, you're the one. You know, you're chosen to do this. You need to do this.
You know, when you spoke to many of the homeless at the homeless shelter, homeless veterans, I mean, you had to have heard stories that were different, similar to yours. Does it transcend time? Does it transcend different battlefields?
The PTSD transcends time. It's a human condition. It's a built-in defense mechanism, I believe, for human beings. And I teach embracing it. I teach learning about yourself. I believe it's not going to go away. I believe if you think about a loved one who passed away, you know, you get tears in your eye. That's a human condition. That's a human reaction. I believe in embracing it and learning more about yourself as opposed to curing it. Now, you heard the last caller say they're curing it. Well, I don't believe that. I don't believe you're going to cure it. I believe you have to make it part of you. You know, find a place for it. I kind of talk to young people and say, look, you know, put your trauma in a little box, put it on a shelf. You know where it is. You know your triggers, you know, and learn to live with it. Learn to embrace it. You wouldn't believe, after a lecture, students come up to me in private, never been in the military, and talk to me about their personal issues. And some I have to actually call the authorities on. They'll share with me, you know, incest and rape. And so now we're talking PTSD, not about military. We're talking in everyday life. And so these lectures and this conversation that I've started affects all people.
You know, when we analyze it and we try to put it together in our minds, is the government doing enough? I mean, are we doing enough? And I've always said that we need to pay back our debt to folks like yourself, to those in our latest wars, Afghanistan and Iraq and the post 9/11 period. Are we paying back our debt, or does it get to the point where it just gets lost in a bureaucracy?
It's lost. You know, we're trying. We're trying, and you know, the American people are trying. I don't know if it's falling on deaf ears. Apparently what we're doing is not working. Otherwise, we wouldn't have these conditions. The bill has come due. We've done this for so long. We've ignored this conversation for so long in this country about mental health that the bill has come due, and we now have a crisis. It happens every day. It happens in schools. It happens in our military. It happened this week right here on Long Island. You know?
Now, how could folks, in a few minutes that we have left, how can they find out more about you and the cause and how you've become such a strong advocate? Let's say websites, phone numbers.
Yes, Walk with Frank is not just about a walk. It's about a concept for change, and it's about education. I believe in education. Please, I need help to put my documentary together. I need funding. If anyone out there would like to join the Walk with Frank team, any corporate sponsors would like to help me, you could reach me at walkwithfrank.org. All my contact information is on that. It's walkwithfrank.org.
And what about our elected officials? Are they paying attention?
Yes, I've got the attention of elected officials. I presented in Albany on the Senate floor. I was recognized in Albany as a viable voice for change, and I was recognized as an educational program. So I've met with the chair people for education at the state level, also the chair people for veterans affairs at the state level. So I'm focusing on New York State, hoping that we could make this a New York State project, and the rest of the country will follow suit.
Yeah.
We could be an example for the rest of the country on what we're doing here to advocate for our veterans and a new direction of education and learning.
And I hope that does come to fruition, and just great work that you're doing. To speak with Frank Romeo is a very, very strong advocate for our veterans and for PTSD. Frank just gave out all the information. Please contact him. Look at that website. Make a decision on yourself. Just a great effort, and particularly on this anniversary, this one day before the 243rd birthday of the United States of America. I'm your host, Tom Schiliro. Frank, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
We're going to take a short break. When we get back, we're going to talk about some politics that are going on out there as usual. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.